Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Thoughts. This is where I take a moment to share with you some things that have been on my mind lately. And what has been on my mind lately is, are we too protective and possessive of certain bands and albums in our lives? And what got me thinking about this is a couple of things. I notice that when I make videos, if I even, there's certain records or certain bands that even if I just criticize them in any way, somebody will come in and say, you're just go off on me. You know, this is my favorite album of all time. You're absolutely wrong. You're absolutely crazy. When we did our Sabbath Sunday with John McEntee from Incantation, he was on Born Again. And he even said it. He's like, you know, this album for me is, it has personal meaning to me, so I sort of protect it like a baby. You know, it's like it's personal to me. So when people attack it, I feel like I have to come to its defense. And you know, I guess it isn't a bad thing that we're like this. That hey, we all have it. That's one thing that I love about hard rock and heavy metal fans. We're very passionate about what we're into, you know, and it means a lot to us, these albums, especially albums. I notice that people tend to get defensive and come to the defense of hardest, you know, the albums that they've lived with the longest. And because they've grown up with it, they have memories and emotions and years and hours and blood and sweat invested in this band or invested in this particular album or group of albums. So it's very personal to them. So when somebody, and in a lot of ways, what we listen to are rock and metal. You know, it's almost like part of our personality, and it's part of who we are. And it's just like I get defensive when people attack heavy metal in general. You know, if I'm out somewhere, somebody doesn't know any better, and they start throwing around stereotypes about what metalheads are and about the music and everything like that. I almost feel like it's my duty to stand up and come to its defense, you know, and say, no, man, you're wrong. You know, you got it all wrong. You just don't understand. You know, and we're all fans of it, and we understand how special it is and what it means. And so I think growing up with this, it in a lot of ways, metal and hard rock and the bands that we listen to and the albums that we love, it becomes part of our personality, it becomes part of our identity in some ways. So when somebody attacks it, when somebody, you know, puts it down or something, or somebody doesn't like the same things that we do, or says something kind of critical or harsh or something that we really like, you know, it sort of gets our heart starts racing, and we feel like we need to, you know, we need to jump in there and, you know, come to and protect it. You know, what are you talking about? You don't like Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden. You know, and I say this all the time on the channel. I'm going to make a separate video about this, that those albums that we were listening to, those bands that we were discovering in that very important time, you know, that 10 to like 16 years old, 12 to 16, 12 to 18, basically high school, you know, junior high, high school, those years, those seem to be the bands and the albums that stick with us the longest, because we have so many memories and emotions, you know, wrapped up in them. And those are sort of like our early, it's like our brain is developed. It's like a child. Like the first 3 years of a child's life is when they learn to speak, and their brains are like putty, you know, and they're taking in all this information. Well, that's kind of how we are when you're first discovering heavy metal and you're a young teenager, whatever, and this stuff is making these impressions on you, and you're hearing all this stuff for the first time, and it's all new, it's all fresh. And, you know, you never really get those experiences back as you go on. So, of course, they stick with us, and it becomes, you know, and it becomes personal. And we, when somebody is saying something negative about these particular bands or these particular albums, we tend to sit up in our seat and want to jump on the keyboard, because I see it all the time. You know, as soon as I put out a video, if I say something negative about something, you know, people jump in, which is cool. I love it. You know, I love to see when somebody, I love it when someone who is, as much as I may not like something, they're just as passionate about it, but on the other side. And I like hearing other people tell me why they like something, or telling me why they they don't like something, you know. It's just as long as they do it in a respectful way. I made a video on that too, how to disagree and be respectful about it with our opinions on these albums and everything. But I think also at times, you know, I found myself, and with this channel, it has helped me learn this, of letting go of certain things, like understanding that, hey, there are people out there, as hard as this is for me to believe, there are people out there that don't like the Ozzy era of Black Sabbath. There are people out there that don't like anything from Iron Maiden. There are people that don't like Judas Priest, but they're still just as much, they're metalheads just like, you know, the rest of us. And it's just that maybe where they came in on it, what their personal preferences and tastes are and everything, and what generation they are. You know, there's always a new generation of kids coming in here and discovering metal and whatever their avenue into heavy metal. I mean, I can't tell you how many kids tell me their first metal album was the Black Album, you know, and I see these bands out there now that are successful younger bands, and I'll hear them talk about, like, yeah, you know, I heard the Black Album and that was my gateway into heavy metal. And I think to myself, like, wow, you know, this is just another generation where they're coming into this. Like, kids coming in saying Fear of the Dark was their first Iron Maiden record, so they have a personal connection to that. But I think sometimes we should, it's healthy to, just like with a child, you know, you have to let them, you can't completely shelter them, you got to let them go sometimes, you got to let them be themselves. And with music and my bands and this channel has helped me see other people's perspective. It's helped me step back a little bit and understand why, you know, why I feel the way I feel, and why other people may feel differently about some album or band that I really love. I remember when I first discovered Martin Popoff and his original Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal. Now, Martin is my favorite author. I totally respect Martin. I love reading his books. I love hearing his opinion on things. But it would probably surprise people is how much I disagree with Martin on a lot of his things. A lot of his favorite albums are not my favorite albums from those bands. A lot of albums that he doesn't like are my favorites, you know. But I love reading his stuff, because even though I may disagree with him, we may have different opinions, he always expresses why he doesn't like those things, and it helps me sort of see it. I remember early on reading his book, and I remember he didn't give a super high rating to the first Black Sabbath record. And I was like, what, is he crazy? You know, that's an amazing record. How could he, you know, how could anyone criticize that album? And then when I sort of thought about it and some of his critiques of it, you know, there's a lot of jamming in some of those songs, and I started to say, yeah, you know, I like that, but I could see how somebody else might not dig that. There might be too much with the unaccompanied guitar solos, etc., etc. So it's cool. It's good that we're protective and possessive of our bands, because it shows how passionate and how much this music means to us. But also, I think it's good to don't let it get to a point where you block yourself off from hearing people's opinions, for where you you know, don't open yourself up to an alternative view on something, or maybe something that's outside of our comfort zone. I mean, let's face it, in life we like to stay in our comfort zones, and it's the same way with music. Sometimes I think that we find ourselves staying in a certain comfort zone and just sort of backing people off. You know, we don't want to hear why someone might not like an album that means the world to us. So, all right, there you go. That's my latest heavy thought there. Are we being too protective of and possessive of the bands that we love? Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you ever feel this, that you're being too protective and, you know, guarding these bands that you like maybe a little bit too much? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.